Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. We're talking cartoons today. In fact, we're talking maybe one of the most influential cartoons in modern history. And I don't mean Simpsons. I mean Mighty Mouse. Okay, now hold on. I don't mean the Mighty Mouse that was created by Terrytoons in the 1940s. It was a cute sort of little parody of Superman. 80 cartoons, ran till 1961. It followed very close on the heels of the Fleischer Superman cartoons, which of course are amazing and required viewing if you are into animation or superheroes or comics or whatever. Now I'm talking about 25 years later, when Ralph Bakshi's animation company produced Mighty Mouse, The New Adventures. So the story apparently goes like this. Bakshi was pitching cartoons to CBS. They were obviously in the market for something different because they also had on Saturday mornings Peewee's Playhouse, which sort of fits into the vibe, the theme of the new Mighty Mouse. And so Bakshi had pitched a couple things. One of the things he pitched, in fact, was Ren and Stimpy, which was passed on. And then he just threw out Mighty Mouse. And CBS liked it. And CBS said, okay, let's do Mighty Mouse. And then Bakshi went, I have no idea who owns Mighty Mouse or has the rights to Mighty Mouse. I might have to figure that out. And it actually turned out CBS owned the rights. They didn't even know it. And so it all came together and we got really one of the most innovative cartoons of its time, a sort of rough draft for Ren and Stimpy. And you could easily say, well, Ren and Stimpy is the template on which a massive amount of modern animation is built, in terms of pace, in terms of style, in terms of feeling just a little bit off, never quite sure what you're going to see next. And I mean in terms of, from stuff that is clearly more for a mature audience, like some of the stuff on Adult Swim, to stuff that is very much for a young audience, like Fairly Odd Parents or something like that. A lot of that stuff comes from Ren and Stimpy, but Ren and Stimpy sort of gets its, it sort of has the test drive with Mighty Mouse, The New Adventures, and a big part of that, of course, was because of who worked on it. So, of course, Mighty Mouse is this superhero rodent. They give him a bit of a backstory in this that mirrors Superman. He didn't have a backstory like that in the past when he was, being done by Terrytoons. So you got your basic superhero premise, good guy saving lives. You get the famous Mighty Mouse, here I come to save the day kind of thing. Polly is there, a little bit less of a damsel in distress, but still in distress sometimes. They add a character named Scrappy, who's this orphan who looks up to Mighty Mouse and is maybe adopted by the alter ego, Mike Mouse. Again, an alter ego he didn't have in the old days that they kind of added for this. So that's your framework that you're dealing with in here. But within that framework, there's a lot of weird stuff going on. This was sort of this retro innovative period in entertainment, a 40s, 50s, 60s cultural revival that was going to be going in from the late 80s into the 90s. Think of folks like John Waters, think of the B-52s, think of Pee Wee Herman. Of course, think of John Kricfalusi and the stuff that he did, because there's a heavy dose of it there. Dave Stevens and The Rocketeer. There's a lot of this stuff going on. People exploring that period, and not just the mainstream stuff from the period, but a lot of the sort of niche weird stuff from that period. Sometimes liking it ironically, sometimes unironically, sometimes kind of both at once. Think of like the Mondo Exotica stuff that was being put out record-wise, Film Facts magazine, etc. It was a thing. It was a subculture, but it was a definite subculture with a lot of momentum at that point, and a lot of that feeds into this thing. And I think Who Framed Roger Rabbit is sort of the point where it kind of went mainstream. Dick Tracy, that movie sort of mainstreamed it as well. But prior to that, it's more niche. And so you get this weird Saturday morning cartoon. And like I said, it is very much this rough draft of Ren and Stimpy. It's sort of, well, I call it retro innovative because it's sort of like a new cartoon style for the time period, but it's drawing on some older cartoon styles. But from a Ren and Stimpy viewpoint, you get a few episodes in particular that really bear the John K. stamp. One of them involves Big Murray and Pearl Pine Blossom, which is a deeply weird cartoon. There's one with Gandy Goose, who's an old Terrytoons cartoon character, having been frozen in ice, Captain America style, defrosting in the modern world of 1987, feeling very lost. He ends up being invited by Mike Mouse to stay in his apartment, and he kind of destroys the place. And you get, if you remember the Ren and Stimpy episode with Sven, where Sven and Stimpy destroy the house and Ren comes home and he's angry, it's very much like that. Slightly lower anger level than Ren Hoek, but it was close. And then there's an episode that basically draws off Alvin and the Chipmunks that just has some definite John K-isms in it and some weird stuff. And so there are a few episodes in particular where you're like going, oh yeah, I mean, this is a test drive for Ren and Stimpy. A lot of this stuff's going to find its way in there. Including, again, the retro sexy women kind of thing. They don't go too far down that line. I mean, Ren and Stimpy, because of where, it was airing, could go a little further in that direction than Mighty Mouse could. But Mighty Mouse probably pushed the envelope for a Saturday morning cartoon at its time. And you had some big names on it. John Hyde was the producer, obviously Ralph Bakshi, sort of the executive supervising producer. He kind of let these guys do what they wanted, but you could pick out names there. John Kricfalusi, you could pick out John Sperry had done some stuff back in the day. But you get, and there's Bruce Timm's name. You'll know him from things. Anyways, some definite names that were going to go on and do some big stuff. So list of cartoons involving folks who worked for the Mighty Mouse, Ren and Stimpy, Simpsons, Tiny Toon Adventures, Cow and Chicken, Family Guy, Oblongs, My Life as a Teenage Robot, Uncle Grandpa, SpongeBob SquarePants, Futurama, lots of Pixar movies, Batman the Animated Series, Animaniacs, Powerpuff Girls, Wander Over Yonder, The Ripping Friends. Tom Minton, the story editor, was a model for The Brain. Doug Minch, the great Batman writer, was a writer on the series too. So it had a lot of names that were not obviously household at that point, but are going to go on to do a lot of great animation stuff. Mighty Mouse, The New Adventures, is in that sort of twilight zone between safe and unsafe. The weird and the strange, and it often feels like you're seeing something you probably shouldn't see, or a line is going to be crossed that probably shouldn't be crossed. It isn't. The show, generally speaking, is safe for kids. but like weird kids who are going to grow up to be cool. I was 15 when this thing came out. I can only imagine that I was seeing it on Saturday mornings, probably because I was just like rolling out of bed about the time it came on. I definitely wasn't watching Pee-wee Herman. I wasn't a big fan of that, but it was one of those things that kind of really caught your attention. And I was probably probably younger than the demographic who was really going to dig this, which was probably more people in their late teens into maybe the mid 20s, and specifically people who were into that retro stuff. I happened to be into it, so I got some of the references, that were going to show up in this cartoon, whereas a lot of people probably were not going to, and that's probably why it didn't have a really long run. But it was an odd thing. It brings in elements of Bob Clampett, Tex Avery. It's a lot of references to stuff that was kind of niche. There's classic Hanna-Barbera references that sometimes seem, yeah, that was me hitting the table. Sometimes seeming like a little bit mocking, but also maybe not. A lot of John K. stuff. I mean, you have a cartoon being narrated by Roadkill. That's weird stuff. I mean, glove with a ventriloquist dummy. You kind of see where I'm going at from here. And again, retro innovative, because one of the things that John K. was a huge fan of and was trying to bring back was Bob Clampett cartoons, Tex Avery cartoons. You get some definite references to those things. And, you didn't get a lot of that when Gen X was growing up. You got Looney Tunes on Saturday mornings, like the Bugs Bunny and Tweety show and stuff. A lot of Chuck Jones, a lot of Friz Freleng. Not so much Clampett, not so much Avery. The really weird, wacky guys. Now, again, Roger Rabbit makes a lot of that mainstream, and you started getting a lot more of those cartoons out there to enjoy than you had prior. But again, Clampett was in that twilight zone of stuff. And but you see a lot of that kind of stuff coming through in this cartoon. I think, though, that one problem they had was that they didn't have the frame rate to work with that those guys did. And so sometimes the animation gets a little bit janky. They're trying to do more than they have the ability to do. But it's got that fringe creative energy, which just can't really be mainstream. But it's so important at moving things and dredging up cool things from the past, creating new things for the future. It's got that going for it. But I think that when it goes from the first season, 13 episodes, to the second season of 6 episodes, it started to break down a little bit. John K. leaves as the sort of overall director. It loses some of that energy. To me, it goes from being a weird cartoon to a geek cartoon. And what I mean by that is geek humor tends to be highly referential. Which can be good. It's sort of a secret handshake, a password, swordfish to get in. Hey, look, I get that reference. But it can also be a little bit repetitive, and doesn't necessarily break new ground because it's so focused on the past. The second season is a little bit more like that. I think it was Ann Bates, former SNL writer, said, you can only be avant-garde for so long before you become guard. And so the stuff they were doing in that first season, man, I don't know if they could have kept the pace up of the weirdness. But again, we get to the second season, you get a lot more referential stuff, a lot more characters that we've seen somewhere else or suggested somewhere else. The pace is extremely manic, sometimes a little bit too manic. to get the jokes. And a lot of the jokes then start becoming, there's a lot of jokes that they're hilarious if you get 40s, 50s references. But again, it's a Saturday morning cartoon. How many 10-year-olds are going to get any of this stuff? How many 10-year-olds are going to go, oh, it's Mighty Mouse is Bing Crosby. That's great. It's, it's the, what was not Journey to the Center of Earth? Fantastic Journey. That's why Pearl ends up in a bikini. Perry Mason references, Bob Hope references. Okay, 60s Batman references with Bat. You get the, big fight cards. Again, Gen X is going to get this. Folks into their early 20s are going to get this stuff. But at that time, in the late 80s, that's not enough of a cartoon watching audience to stay alive. By the time Ren and Stimpy comes along, and the Gen Xers are now in the late teens, early 20s stage, we're way more prone to watch that kind of stuff, and did. But reference-wise, if you love reference stuff, you get the Bronze Border, you get what was it called? What did he call him? It wasn't the Incredible Sloth, the Rampaging Sloth. Deputy Dog shows up. Of course, John Kay. So you get a Peter Lorre character. In this case, a little kid who talks like Peter Lorre. You get a sort of Marlon Brando-esque pirate captain, Alvin and the Chipmunks. There's a great one. I want to say it was second season that works off of the old Duck Tracy cartoon. And you get these magazines that he's looking at. And then the villains come to life, including Woman Cat, who's a cat who wears a human woman mask on her head. There's a Vincent Price sort of send up. Hanna-Barbera, there's a Jetsons, Flintstones kind of thing. There's a Scooby-Doo one where this is where Mighty Mouse is getting flipped through channels by this bored kid. The Rocky and Hoodwinkle show, which actually has Rocky on it, Michael Jackson, Arnold Schwarzenegger. That is Mr. E, which is a combination of Mr. T and Ed Sullivan. You see, it's brilliant. It's amazing stuff. But it's also no surprise that it got 19 episodes because kids, we're not going to get this. They could get this, just the crazy, zany humor. But even some of that, we get a send up of anime. Some of that stuff was even probably not going to land with them. Oh, and the Mighty Heroes show up as well. So that's why I think when you get down to Mighty Mouse, The New Adventures, and why you watch it, it could be funny sometimes. I laughed at it here and there. But I think it's almost more a matter of its place in cartoon history. That it is this early show that launches 1,000 shows with manic jokes, with crazy references, with this sort of retro artistic sense to it. Shows that cross lines and sometimes in very interesting ways. If nothing else, Mighty Mouse, The New Adventures is an absolute original. There was nothing like it on TV at the time, except maybe Pee-wee's Playhouse. That was it. You can find the episodes online. If you are an animation buff, if you love retro, if you love weird, and you have not seen Mighty Mouse, The New Adventures, go watch it. I don't think you'll be sorry. I don't know that it's going to be your favorite cartoon ever, but I think you'll be happy that you saw it and you'll get something out of it. So what say you in the audience? Any Mighty Mouse fans out there? Anybody who hated this cartoon at the time because it just upturned the purity of the Mighty Mouse character? Because it sure as hell did. Anybody out there who loved this cartoon at the time and found it like kind of like mind opening for you, because that's what it did to me. It was like, I've never seen stuff like this on TV before. Wow, this is actually really, really cool. I think I like it. I don't know if I like it. I'm pretty sure I like it. It was that kind of a show. But yeah, let me hear from you in the comments. Love to see what you think about it. If you have any questions about the show, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. If you enjoyed this video, please think about subscribing maybe, and maybe sharing with a friend. It helps my little channel grow, and I would really appreciate it. But until the next review, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Try to have a little bit of fun, and I will see you again in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.